Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Callie and today I'm going to be going through my October wrap up. Now October was a very polarizing month, I would say. I read a total of 23 books, DNFing a total of 3, rereading 2, and I had 1 audiobook. I have my nifty pile right next to me. Actually not DNF'd. I unhauled a ton of books that I read this month. Usually I'll unhaul 2 to 4 books a month, depending, because it depends on what I rate it, depends on how much I like it. I obviously automatically unhaul any books I DNF. I also DNF books that I have no desire in keeping. So I try and give them to better homes of people who will actually enjoy them. So I unhauled a ton this month. I don't have the total, but as I was going through, I use a sticky note method if I don't have the book with me, so I remember to talk about it. And the amount of sticky notes I had to write this month was weird. So without further ado, since I did read so many, I'm gonna jump right into it. The first book being one of my rereads, and that is Seafire by Natalie C. Parker. I read this right when I was getting back into reading, and it looked like it was advertised as a female Jack Sparrow takes the seas. And I love Pirates of the Caribbean, big fan. So I picked this up immediately and I remember enjoying it. And the 2 other books in the series came out and I finally wanted to just sit down, reread the book, and finish the series. I did hate the cover change, hated it with a passion. It went from this really cool, I'm gonna put the old one up for this. It was this really cool compass and I enjoyed it. I loved it. It was really pretty. And then they turned it into like actual people, and I hate it when they put actual people on a cover. I actually lowered my score, not by much. I originally gave this book 4 stars and I dinged it down to 3.5. The issues that I noticed is this felt like a sequel. The prologue, I feel like, could have been an entire book, and you could have meshed books 1 and 2 together into one book. I just felt like this author expected us to be in love with all these characters and then deal with these losses, and I just didn't care. I did get the very Jack Sparrow revenge plotline. I really liked that and I was here for that. It's just I feel like we never really got the connection to the other characters like we were supposed to in order to have that emotional connection that is needed to not understand, but empathize with the other characters. So I did end up bringing that one down to a 3.5, and obviously I unhauled it because it's a sticky note. After that, I wanted a book I knew I was going to enjoy, and that is Heartstopper, Vol.II by Oseman. This is a graphic novel about 2 high school boys who fall in love, and it's adorable. It's exactly that. The art, I really like the art. The story is just so cute and wholesome, and I'm here for it. I gave it 5 stars. I love this series. I am planning on reading volume 3 this month so that I can be prepared, because I think volume 4 either comes out at the end of this month or in December, but I'm pretty sure it still comes out this year. Up next, I picked up Defy the Night by Brigid Kemmerer. I picked this up for a couple reasons. One, we picked this for our readathon in October, and we picked it because we went and saw Brigid Kemmerer, and I don't know if any of you watching have ever been to an author interview signing, but once you go to those, I had this insatiable desire to read all of her books. And I did. If you watched my wrap up last month, I read a ton of Brigid Kemmerer books, and I wanted to continue that trend with Defy the Night. Defy the Night, I gave 4.5 stars. I loved this. This was a Robin Hood pandemic mystery. I almost got Princess Bride vibes from it. Might be because we have a guy in a mask who reminded me, I pictured as Wesley the entire time. Plus there's like a whole apothecary, and I got a lot of Princess Bride vibes from this, which is a fantastic movie and I love it. But I love this. The intrigue, the mystery, the character dynamics were so cool. I also really liked how you're told that one side is bad and evil, but then you start to get that side and you're like, all right, you're not maybe as bad as people are making you out to be. And I really liked that perspective because it added a ton of depth to the story itself. and I just loved it. And can we appreciate the really pretty version that I have with the very lovely purple sprayed edges? And of course, I've got the art in the back. This is the Fairy Loot edition, which I got in September. So I have 2 copies of this book, but that's okay because I love it. And it's an amazing book that I would highly recommend if you like Robin Hood, Princess Bride, Red Queen. I would also recommend this if you liked the Red Queen series. After that, I did end up picking up Steel Tide, which is the sequel to Seafire. I like to not burn myself out. I try not to read an entire series all at once. I have found that if I do that too much, I will get burnt out of books. And then not want to read for several months. So I break it up with other books in between, and I have found that that is a lot easier. So I picked up Steel Tide by Natalie C. Parker, which I gave 3 stars. This book had such middle book syndrome. Like I was saying earlier, if the first book and the second book were put together and made the second book, and we were given a really decent, good prologue for book 1, it would have been awesome. There was so much potential, but everything was either drawn out way too much or way too rushed. I also feel like this book falls into the trope of everything just kind of falls into the main character's lap and everything's hunky-dory, except when things go bad. And then when things go bad, we don't get to see the visualization of the things going wrong or characters dying, getting injured, anything like that. We're just told as an aftermath, and it's like, well, one sentence, like, okay, well, who's hurt? And they just give you a list. You're like, well, what happened? We miss that in this. So I didn't really care for this second book. Yeah, it just went down. It was fine. There was a couple of really cool scenes. The climax was really well done. There's this really cool prison breakout scene that I enjoyed. It just was a big lull. Up next, I picked up Fire with Fire by Destiny Soria. This is a story of 2 sisters who are complete opposites. One is bound to determined to become the best dragon slayer, monster slayer, as the daughter of dragon slayers. The other one kind of doesn't care. But she's very naturally good at the training, much to her sister's chagrin. But when the younger sister, the one who's a little bit more lazy and impassive, meets a dragon and the dragon ends up saving her life, she has to rethink her entire perspective of life. And then her sister finds out about this and they have this just war with each other. And I really like this. The thing that I wasn't prepared for, I was told this was dragons, sisters, dragon hunters. I honestly expected this to be in a similar YA kind of era of medieval times, that kind of thing. This was in modern day, which was really cool, and I thought it was really well done. The magic, the dragons, the lore, everything about this was so good, and I was living for it. I ended up giving this 4 stars. My only qualm with this one is I want there to be a second book, but this is a standalone. That's my only issue that I had with this, because I could just devour more from this world. Also, again, I have a really pretty edition. I think this one has, yeah. This one also has art on the dust jacket. And it's got art on the cover. This is the Fairy Loot. I think this is the Fairy Loot edition. Sometimes it tells me. Yeah, this is the Fairy Loot edition from June. And I did pick up Stormbreak, which is the 3rd and final book in the Seafire trilogy. Similar to Steel Tide, I gave it 3 stars. It was a decent ending, but it was very anticlimactic considering how much they were building to this huge revenge story. I just feel like there wasn't a ton of development, plot or character-wise, within the story enough to make me feel that connection to the characters and care about. Honestly, the only thing I cared about with the main character is she was called Callie once or twice, and I really like seeing my name in books because I have a unique name, so I don't see it very often, and she spelled it correctly. But she typically went by Calla the entire time, but I really got excited every so often when she got called Callie. So that was kind of the only thing I really enjoyed from an excitement perspective. Otherwise, it's just everything was kind of, There was no amping up. There was just sort of plateaued for the entire third book, which was really unfortunate. I really wanted to like these because I love the pirate stories, but unfortunately this one just did not do it for me. After that, I picked up When Sparks Fly by Helena Hunting. Brittany and I saw this at the store and we had no idea she was coming out with a new book. So we were super pumped when we saw. We love Helena Hunting. I read this one and I gave it 4 stars. It's not my favorite Helena Hunting book, but she is great at developing characters. This threw a bunch of different tropes. It had that forced proximity trope, the caregiver, grumpy sunshine, badass girl kind of thing. It had all of that going for it, and I really enjoyed it. I was a bit nervous about the caregiver trope because that almost felt a bit forced with the romance, but I think that it was done really well enough that it didn't have that forced Stockholm Syndrome-y aspect to it. I will say, comparatively to Helena Hunting's other books, this was more an emotional romance rather than a physical. There were the physical attributes of a romance in this, just not as heavily as they are in her other books, and I think that's what I was missing from this one, because yes, while Helena Hunting can pack a phenomenal emotional punch to my stomach, she's also fantastic at writing the physical stuff, and that piece was missing for me in this one. Up next, I read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This was a horror story about vampires, and I heard such good things about this book, and so I was so excited about it, and I hated it. I have in my, I don't know if you can tell, I have my review book out so I can remember what I reviewed things, and it has all my notes. It says I gave it 3 stars, but honestly, the more I've thought about this book, every time I want to dock it a star. Like, I'm at kind of like at a 1 or 2 right now with thinking about this book. I cared less about the vampires because of how horrifically misogynistic and just abusive the spouses were to the women in this book club. Like, they created this book club because their husbands sucked, but then, like, they did nothing about it. So I'm just screaming at these characters to not even give a crap about the vampire. Vampire's not doing anything to anybody in this town. It's their husbands. Like, they were the real monster. And I was so focused on that, and it got... I understand that it was horror, and I don't delve into the horror world a lot. I typically stay in the thriller suspense bracket. This just got gross, and I don't get grossed out easily, but I was grossed out. There was some scenes that were nasty, and I was not prepared for. I didn't like it, and I know a ton of people did. So moving on from that, I read Long May She Reign by Rhiannon Thomas. I gave this one 3 stars. I really like the concept of this book, being that, like, she was never supposed to get a throne, and then, like, everyone in her family gets poisoned, and then she's suddenly on the throne. I thought that was a really cool concept, and I liked the mystery elements. I liked that she was very scientific, and I enjoyed those parts, but, like, everything else felt really cookie cutter when it comes to a YA book. You know, she's the naive pick-me girl, and I feel like she was almost rewarded for her naivety, for her being naive. And I didn't care for that. I wanted her to actually learn and grow into her new role as queen. We never got that, which was kind of a bummer. I also felt like the climax wasn't very climactic. It was really dull, and I had to, like, reread it because I was like, wait, that's it? So unfortunately, this one was just kind of bland for me, so I only ended up giving it 3 stars. Next, I read Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This is more my wheelhouse, thriller and mystery, suspense. I loved this. I gave this book 5 stars. This was so good. This book takes place over the course of one night, and it's this girl who's just trying to get home from, I think, the East Coast to the Midwest, and she does a rideshare board, which is a real thing. My college campus had rideshare boards, and she's basically dropping out of college. You find this out in the first chapter. She's dropping out of college because her roommate was just killed by this murderer that's been going around the college campus, and she just can't deal with it anymore, which is kind of fair. While she's in this car ride, she starts to kind of realize that the driver she thinks is the murderer, so she has to try and survive the night. This was so good. I love Riley Sager's writing. Honestly, the only Riley Sager book I didn't like was their first one. Everyone else has been fantastic. It was creepy. I think Riley Sager's shining moment is building the ambiance of a book. I felt like I was in this cramped car hearing all the things in the trunk going about, and like he's just so good at descriptions where they're not long and lengthy like J.R.R. Tolkien, but they're long enough where you feel everything. And I loved it. I read this book at night, which was a very poor choice, and I read it in one sitting because I needed to know. And I think I've done that with almost every single one of their books, is read it all in one night, because I can't go to bed wondering what's going on in these books. So I really liked this one. Next up, I have Rise Up from the Embers by Sara, Raasch, and Kristen Simmons. This is the sequel to Set Fire to the Gods, which is gods are actually real and their wars are actually big gladiator battles. I really like this series, or duology. I thought it was really unique. The gods not just being these fabled beings in the sky that you only see after like a character dies to like give them all the answers that they were missing and their whole journey. No, they're just like actual people who suck. This one did play on the trope that like the gods just are evil and they suck. And I really like that trope. I think it's fun. And the fact that they were actually able to have conversations with these gods was even better. I gave this 4 stars. I think this was a great finale to this duology. I love the magic. The lore is fantastic. The way the story came together was done really seamlessly, and it had all the great gladiator battles. The magic battles were fantastic and just such a good time. Next, I did my other reread, which I have been re-listening to the ACOTAR series through Audible, and I finished Akamath, which is probably, I don't know, I go back and forth between this one and Silver Flames being my favorite, but I reread this because I need something to tide me over until Crescent City 2 comes out. So I've been reading this. Although, after that, I had my first DNF, which was The Similars by Rebecca Hanover. And I DNF'd this on page 10. Usually, I have a rule with myself when it comes to DNFing. I try and give a book 100 pages. Because I feel like you can kind of get into the meat, you can get to know the writing style, the characters, you get a better sense at 100 pages. Obviously depends on how long the book is. But after 10 pages, this book tried to have a perspective of like The Office. I think within those first 10 pages, the character said, or like the inner monologue literally said, insert eye roll here about 20 times, and I wanted to throw the book. Like, I didn't even know what was happening in the story. Like, obviously it was 10 pages, but like I could not get over the over-exaggeration, the pan to camera type of writing style. It didn't go over well in my brain, and I hated it. So I DNF'd it. Up next, I picked up These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. This follows this very modern witch coven when things start to go badly. I really liked this. Again, very similar to Fire with Fire. I really am digging the magic within our modern world because I love seeing how the integration of modern technology is approached within magic, and I really like it. There was a ton of the Muggle comparisons, which was really fun. I think one of the best things about this is you're watching the main character get over a breakup with the ex-girlfriend over here on the tarot card. And you see the different stages of grief from the breakup, because the breakup happens prior to the story. And you get bits and pieces as the story goes on. And I really enjoyed how we watched Hannah grow and kind of come into her own, even with her ex being a constant in her life. Just watching that growth along with the plot was very beautifully written, and I very much enjoyed every second of this book. Next, I picked up The Perfect Place to Die by Bryce Moore. This is a story of the murder house that was located in Chicago during the World's Fair. I didn't know that until I picked up the book. I know that's like a very popular time to write about because like this guy built this whole hotel to murder people. And I'm actually from the Chicago area, so you'd think I'd be more interested, but I'm not. I gave this 3 stars. This basically follows this farm girl trying to find her other farm girl sister who ran away to Chicago to big dreams kind of thing. And this farm girl somehow makes it in the city to this murder house and does very well for being never touching a city and coming from like basically an Amish farm. So it was a little much. I hated the main character. She was annoying. And she sort of leaned into her annoying and naiveness. And again, similar to Long May She Reign, she was kind of rewarded for that, and I didn't like that. I like it when characters get kind of knocked down and learn from it. And I feel like she didn't really learn. She was just given all of the tools to try and succeed, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was fine for a spooky book, but like, you know how it ends. Like right away, you know how it ends. So that was kind of a bummer. There was no real mystery to it. Up next, I actually have my 2 other DNFs for this month. The first one is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I really wanted to like this book. I persevered to 100 pages for this one, and I just couldn't get over it. It was very flowery writing. I know this is a very highly acclaimed book. It won a Stonewall Award. I couldn't get into it, and I just didn't care. So I put it down. And the next one that I DNF'd was War of the Cards by Colleen Oakes, which is the 3rd and final book in the Queen of Hearts trilogy that I had been reading the past couple months. But I opened it, I looked at the first page, and just said I didn't care enough. I asked Sara how it ended. I told her it was stupid how that ended, and then I DNF'd it. And that's how that went. So, because I am trying to not read bad books, I'm trying to only enjoy good books. So with that though, after that kind of string of crummy books, I had my next 5-star read, which is Circle of Shadows by Evelyn Skye. This follows this academy of assassins in, I think it's feudal Japan. Felt very feudal Japan, and it was awesome. I loved every second of it. This was so cool. The atmosphere, the characters, there's magic. The way these assassins or rogues were able to move about and get through everything was so cool, and I loved every second of this. I cannot wait for the second book, especially now how without this one ended. It's only a duology, but still, I really liked it. This was everything that I could have ever wanted. They were basically rogues from D&D, and I loved it. It was, I loved it. Up next, I had another really good read, which was Sisters of the Snake by Serena and Sasha Nanua. This is a India-inspired story, which was very Princess and the Pauper, which was awesome. I love Princess and the Pauper. It's a great story, and it was very reminiscent of the Barbie Princess and the Pauper, but with snakes. And I'm a Slytherin, so I lived for that. There was this really cool snake magic, reminiscent of like how Loki works, and oh, it was fantastic. I gave this 4.5 stars. The sisters switching places was really cool, getting to know the magic and their own backstories, how they came into their own as people. They were twin sisters, but they were very distinct people. And I really liked that, so I'm super pumped for book 2 because this story, it's very vibrant and the storytelling is just very beautifully written. The magic, like I said, the magic, the lore, everything about this. There's talking snakes. There's talking snakes, which was so cool. I loved this. Oh, it was just so much fun. And I don't know, every time I think about this book, I just think of the Barbie Princess and the Pauper movie, which is a great movie. It was just so good. Up next, I picked up The Brightest Night by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now, I think I said this in my TBR, but I thought this was the final book in this series. I thought it was a trilogy. And I got to the last 15 pages and was panicking the entire time to then learn that this is 3 out of 4. And book 4 hasn't even been put on Goodreads yet, which is why I thought it was a trilogy, because on Goodreads, it ends with this one. But on her website, it says that a book 4 is coming. It's even named. I don't know why it's not on Goodreads, but whatever. I will say, though, this was my least favorite book. This had such, I don't want to say second book, third book syndrome, 3rd out of 4, middle book syndrome. We'll call it middle book syndrome because that still works. Nothing happened until the end. and I was waiting for this huge climax at the end. And don't get me wrong, there was a big climax at the end, but it wasn't what I was expecting. And the last like 4 pages, I was panicking because bad things were happening. But before that, nothing happened. This entire book was a training montage, which is fine for like 10 pages, but like this book was like 500 some. Yeah, this book's like 500 pages, and most of it was training montage, which was really kind of boring. I do feel like if I had read the Lux series, I would have enjoyed it more because there was a lot more callbacks during the training. She's trained by a bunch of different people from, I assume, the Lux series, but I never read that one. So I didn't get as much enjoyment out of it, I think. Next, I picked up The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I gave this one 5 stars. This book was fantastic. This follows a dual timeline of a woman who just found out her husband cheated on her, and she goes on their like 10-year anniversary trip by herself, and then we're following this story in the 1800s of a woman who kept an apothecary shop for women who wanted to kill their abusive husbands. Now, I know neither of those two sound like they correlate, but they come together so well. The research and the history was so cool within this book. I loved it. It was so cool. I loved the flip-flopping between the 2 time periods. I never favored one or the other within this. I was always excited. I'm like, oh yes, we're going back to this time period, or oh yes, we're going back to this one. I was always excited to know what was going on one timeline and to the other, which I think is a testament to the writing. And this isn't a very long book, but it was fantastic, and I would highly recommend this book. This was probably one of my favorite recommendations Sara gave me because this was Sara's pick for me this month. Up next, I picked up Barbarian Mind by Ruby Dixon, which is the 4th book in the Ice Planet Barbarian books. I think this is probably one of my favorite ones. I like this because we're kind of away from all the other girls and aliens, and this one had a big time jump, which I really appreciated. And I enjoyed. I really liked this. This one was fun. I gave it 4 stars. And next I picked up Realm of the Gods by Tamora Pierce, which is the final book in the Immortals Quartet that I've been reading for the past couple of months. This was probably my least favorite because nothing happened. I also have a major issue with the romance that happened within this book. It just felt dirty and wrong and kind of ruined the entire series for me. So there was that. So I gave this 2.5 stars, and I obviously can't go into too much detail about this one since it is the final book in a series of 4, but it just felt like the one thing I will say, if you're interested in going into this, it feels like grooming, and it gave me a very icky feeling. Next, I picked up Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I have slowly gone into the descent of loving Colleen Hoover books. And this one was no different. It wasn't as top tier as It Ends With Us for me, but this was so good. This one was more on the romance side, but with tragedy just right there constantly creeping up on you, and I really liked how that was portrayed in this. It was so endearing, but also just extremely tense. It was all over the place, and I really loved that because it didn't feel all over the place. Everything felt seamless and well thought out and purposeful, but when I'm thinking about the actual plot, it is all over the place. So I loved this one. We're following this girl who is kind of down on her luck and has to move in with her pilot brother while he lives in a pilot flight attendant hotel kind of setup. I mean, I think they're apartments, but they're sized like hotels. And she ends up falling for his neighbor across the way who is also a pilot who has a secret, and they decide to become friends with benefits. And he has 2 rules: is you can't ask about his past and don't expect a future. And what I like about this is you get both perspectives, and you get them. You would think you're only getting the girl falling for him because it's his rules, but really it's both of them. And I liked that. I think it was really unique, opposed to all the other friends with benefits where it's one starts to fall and then the other starts to realize that they're falling. But this one, both of them were very, I'm not dealing with this kind of mentality, which was interesting because usually it's one or the other. but highly recommend it. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Next, I picked up The Roommate by Rosie Danan. This is about a socialite who is trying to get away from her socialite family and tries to go after her longtime childhood crush who just kind of up and leaves her with his roommate, who she finds out is a porn star. And our romance just goes from there. This was really good. I gave it 4 stars. This was top tier. And the last book that I read this month was Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. I don't know how to explain this book. It has a ton of trigger warnings for a reason, but basically we're following these 2 pen pals who have never met, but they only live like 1 town over from each other. And one pen pal decides to go and find his after tragedy strikes, and things go on from there. I know it sounds very innocent. It's not. The tagline for this is perfect, is we were perfect together until we met. And it was a lot. This was a lot. I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars, but it was a lot. I think this actually did have a good commentary on the masks we put on in front of other people, especially in high school, and it had that aspect. It talked a lot of really hot topics, and I really enjoyed that. So I would recommend this, but I would be very wary of the trigger warnings, please. They're real. And that's gonna be it for my wrap up. I read 23 books. I know it doesn't look it, but I have all these sticky notes that I've had as well. But that's gonna be it for today's video. Thanks for sticking around. We post videos every Tuesday and Thursday with the occasional Sunday. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, and I will see you guys in our next video. Bye.